Okay, right, we shall begin. So good evening, everyone, and welcome to what is our second Leading Your International School webinar and first ever on the theme of human resources. I am delighted to introduce to you our speaker for this evening's webinar, Warren Cook of TAHR Services. Warren has been almost 3 decades of practical industry experience across the public sector, private sectors, and various industries, from pharmaceutical to financial to legal. I'm sure you'll all benefit from these unique insights that will help broaden your perspective on leadership. I've personally known Warren for 4 years, and he's a great friend of mine. He was the co-author of my book, Leading Your International School, and he's uniquely placed to support you and address some of the many challenges that international schools face when it comes to human resources. So thank you for joining us, wherever you are, what time zone you're in. And Warren, thank you very much for joining us tonight. Over to you.
Great, Andre, thank you so much. And Jane, thanks so much for all your hard work, both of you, for helping us put this together. And thank you, everybody, for taking time out of your busy days and schedules to join. So our focus today is the first 90 days and making sure we're preparing you for success in that role. An agenda, cover this very quickly, and then we're going to jump into the materials. From an agenda perspective, I'm going to do a quick introduction about kind of the topic. I want to cover my perspective of why you should be here today, and hopefully that aligns with why you're actually here. Understanding the situation you're facing moving into either a new position or a new role in an organization. Knowing yourself, knowing things about yourself that are going to help you be successful through that transition, especially the first 90 days. Building trusting relationships, which is extremely critical on this journey of engaging the team and building out the team. We're going to talk about the strategic plan itself, which is the first 90 days, what that plan should look like. And then we're going to actually walk through each month and kind of the details around what you should cover. We're going to talk about setting goals and expectations, both with your manager or people leader and your staff. Performance management, why it's critical to address that topic and that subject matter during your first 90 days with your people leader. It's really, really critical. And then a concept I like referring to is managing up. I've heard it referred to a lot of different things, but it may be scary because I tell people it's your responsibility to manage your people leader. Your manager, your supervisor, and they get kind of like, wait, what do you mean? They manage me. But managing up is a really great concept that if you embrace it, it can be really good. And then we'll have a Q&A section at the end. I like my webinars to be interactive. So if at any point in time, if you have a question on the topic I'm covering on a slide, I usually ask if there's any questions at the end of each slide. Feel free to type them into the chat. And then Jane and the team will read them out to me to make sure that I can cover that. If it's something I know I'm going to cover later on in the slide deck in the presentation, I'll just let you know that we're going to cover it later. And if it's something I can answer on the spot, I will. So I want to really make sure that we take advantage of that and take care of that. But I think we all learn the best from having a practical, interactive discussion. So from an introduction perspective, it's just about passing on practical experience. I know Andre said, almost 30 years I've been doing this. I've been in Fortune 50 companies. I've been in international public, private industry, consulting, in-house, you name it. From an HR perspective, I've kind of done it. But my goals for the webinar are really about sharing this wisdom with you, specifically because a lot of organizations, especially the larger organizations that I've served in and worked in over the years, have hundreds of HR people sometimes and millions of dollars to spend, and it's not always transferred to every organization I've touched or been involved with. So I really like taking the wide and vast experience I have and bring it down to practical experience that allows you to implement things right away and take advantage of all those years of wisdom and experience. Practical tips is definitely what I want to do, and I want to empower you to take control of your career and this journey you're on during the first 90 days and beyond. But the first 90 days are most critical. So why are you here? Hopefully, it's about maximizing the value you can contribute in the first 90 days, but also really getting set up for success and making sure you're comfortable, making sure that you have an idea of how to achieve success, how to engage your team, how to engage the people leader, how to achieve the goals of the school, and really serve those students most effectively, right? The ultimate mission is making sure the students and the families of the students feel like they've gotten a lot of value and you've set them up for success during their whole life. So I hope you want to today, improve your ability and skills to prepare a strategic plan during those first 90 days. I really want to make sure that if you have any anxiety, or although none of you seem to have any fears, but if you have any stress or anxiety about a new job or a new role during your journey here, this should help alleviate a lot of that and help you mitigate that effectively. And then empower yourself in the new position to achieve that success. One of the things I do want to highlight is there were some amazing questions when you registered. And so some of these questions, I'm just going to touch on, read some out loud. Some of them will certainly be covered in this session. And then some of these, we could certainly connect with you and talk about how to get those questions answered, because they're not in the context or in the scope of this session. There was a question about interviewing and identifying great talent during the interview process. Not really part of this core, but it's something we can definitely address. It was about challenges that you encounter leading for the first time. That's definitely covered in here. The challenges of the first 90 days is covered in here. Managing stress is covered in here. Although we can also do a behavioral health, mental health, life-work balance type of conversation anytime to help you with that. Leading change management, we cover a lot of that in here as well. Being an outstanding principal from a great principal, that's all about leadership. So yeah, these are great topics. How do you, respecting the history of the past in the organization, that's actually covered. So a lot of what you brought up in this is definitely covered through this presentation. So I wanted to make sure you knew that we reviewed the questions and that we're going to try to incorporate a lot of this in there. But certainly at the, if not during the slides, at the end of the presentation, we'll have Q&A and certainly want to answer your questions so you get the most out of this. So again, thank you for joining us. So understanding the real situation that you're facing in the organization in a new role, and as maybe a new people leader, or maybe just as a new school principal, whatever that is, there's going to be some real challenges that you face. And I think about this because a lot of individuals I've coached and trained and mentored over the years through the interview process couldn't answer the question, what would you do during the first 90 days when hired? It was almost as if they never put themselves in the shoes of actually getting the job. And once you have gotten the job, and once you have the opportunity, there's some really key things you should think about as far as what you're facing. So yes, you're facing a new role, and you're going to have responsibilities, and you're going to be leading, and you're going to have a budget, and you're going to have a lot of focus on meeting the mission, vision, and goals of the school. But the specifics of the role you're going into, I want to bring your attention that there's probably 3 categories of why you're taking that position, unless it's a completely new role. So if it's a completely new role, it has its own challenges of new school, new principal, or new teaching role or administrative role, has its own unique characteristics. But from a perspective of impact in those first 90 days, if you take over a role of someone, they either retired, they were promoted out, or they were terminated or separated from the organization. And there happens to be, unfortunately, high rates of turnover and low retention in organizations. Dean, can you mute everybody just so I don't get the back? Thank you. So if the person you were taking over from had retired from the role, chances are that they were likable, that they had good programs, good practices. What they were doing was very successful. They probably have great support from the other members of the school, whether it's internal, external stakeholders, whether they were vendors, suppliers, whether they were just other administrative leadership. And they probably had a great reputation, or from a public perspective, they were viewed very positively. So if you move into that type of role, it's going to present you some unique challenges as far as if you're going to make changes, if you come in with different ideas or different methods without following this 90-day plan as far as assimilation. Same thing if someone that you've moved into the role and they were promoted up out of the role into another position in the school or organization, right? Oftentimes they're still there. So they still may have influence over the role, over people, over decisions. And being aware of that and recognizing that is going to be extremely key for you in navigating that position and navigating how to overcome challenges, overcome obstacles. The staff that work for those folks might be very supportive of that person as well, but they might also be problematic for you. Think about someone that was promoted on and the position became vacant. There's a possibility some of the individuals applied for the role that are the staff, and they might not have gotten the position. So you could face adversity without even realizing that some of the team might be supporting that former incumbent and not really focused on the new person coming in when they thought they might get that opportunity. And then that person still has influence potentially and hopefully. So as we talk about the actual steps of the 90-day plan, as we get into that, it's going to be important to realize that that's an asset you should leverage a relationship with to make sure that you can leverage all the success they've had and then help gain help and assistance from them as you move into any kind of change initiative to set things up to move forward. And you really want to understand what made them successful. If they were viewed as successful and promoted, what were those key things they did to be successful? Because every organization is not the same. It's all unique. And the uniqueness of every organization are their people. So what you might have done successfully in one organization may not be viewed as equally successful in another organization. So learning what that success was is key. And then the third box here that probably to me is one of the most worrisome ones is if the former person was actually terminated or separated. That generally means that they were unsuccessful or failed some aspect of their role. So unlike the first two items on this slide, where there was positive outcomes potentially, when you get to this third one, where maybe the person was terminated or separated, in addition to the normal challenges of the position, you may also be facing a negative situation, bad vibes, stakeholders not collaborating, no engagement, just failure in hitting the goals for the students, failures for hitting goals for the organization. So you really have to understand this situation and know kind of what's happened when you walk into it. And this should influence and impact how you develop that 90-day plan. Any questions on this slide or this topic and concept of really understanding what you're walking into? And if there are any questions that come through in there, Jane, go ahead and feel free to share them with me. But I'll move on. So knowing yourself, one of the other things that I found is people are excited when they go into a new role to add value, contribute, make change, and kind of find the similar type of success they've had in a prior role. And oftentimes jumping into that and going down that path can really cost you. It could come off very negative. And so what I try to depict here visually, and we're going to talk through it, is really knowing what the reality is of your capabilities right off the bat and understanding some things you should do and should immediately jump on and think about moving forward, and things you really should be cautious of or aware of not to do. So on the scale here, you'll see I try to tip it intentionally of there's probably more things you shouldn't do right away than what you should do. So from the left side of things you can do, you're going to be able to offer ideas. When you put your 90-day plan together and we go through in detail what that is made up of, you're going to be offering ideas. You're going to be offering suggestions, because reality is you were brought on for some reason. You bring a level of competence, a level of experience and knowledge, and potentially some great success in your prior roles and positions that this new organization, this new school is looking to leverage from you. But walking in day one and just throwing everything out there isn't the best way to do it. You're bringing that experience that you have. Obviously, when you're hired, they had some criteria in the interview process, and it was probably a very rigorous process you went through. So having that success now and realizing what you can do is really important. And then you can add value. At any opportunity where you can add value in a professional, respectful, and collaborative way that's inclusive, you're going to be able to do that pretty quickly. So that for sure are things we're going to highlight and focus as we go through this presentation on things we want you to do. On the other side, though, here, and again, it's tipping the scale because too many people jump down this path. Really avoid, you should not come into any new organization and immediately tell them what they're doing is wrong. Whether the prior person was terminated or whether they're struggling or whether they're in challenges, we're still dealing with human beings, and people generally don't like a new person coming in and just telling them everything is wrong. Even if it is, I will tell you from experience, as Andre pointed out, all these years of experience, from a consulting perspective, there's many organizations I'm brought in and right off the bat, the board or the leadership team say, this is a mess, this isn't working. But if I just go, yeah, everything you're doing is wrong and you're making so many mistakes, it doesn't really work well for building a relationship. So avoid telling them they're wrong, but we're going to talk about how you do go about identifying those challenges and those areas that can be enhanced, improved, and changed. Don't think you can come in and just make them immediately do something differently. We're going to dive into what you want to do to start that change management initiative. We're going to talk about how you lead that effectively and how you engage. But just walking in the door and saying, you need to do this, you need to do that, you need to do that, sounds more like a dictatorship and that directive usually is not welcomed from a culture perspective in any organization. You also generally can't force culture. And hopefully some of you join us next Tuesday on our culture and inclusion presentation that I'll be making. But culture is, the actions and behavioral norms of an organization. So while they might have some document or some guiding principles that says our culture is this, this, and this, rarely is it translated from paper to action across an entire organization completely and holistically. It's very hard to do, and very few organizations are really, really successful with this, often because there's just turnover, right? New people come into the organization, new people leave the organization. So culture is something that's tough, but you can't instantly bring a new drive of culture from a prior organization because it's completely different people. But just keep that in mind, that culture is something you are going to influence as a leader, and you're going to drive those behaviors in that direction, but you can't force it. And then changing in practices, we're going to obviously want to change policies and procedures and behaviors of the staff and the organization to serve the students, but you can't just force it. So the idea is that everything on this shouldn't do are things you are going to do, just not in a way where you're pushing, forcing, driving without some other steps that happen first. Are there any questions on the do's and don'ts? Happy to take a moment and pause and see if there's any questions that you'd like answered at this point. Jane, are there any? No questions yet? Okay, great. All right, moving on. So how do you kind of avoid frustration through the process? Because you don't want to get frustrated when, personally and professionally, if I go in an organization and they say, listen, we're hiring you as the head of HR and we want you to fix things. And if I start trying to fix things too quickly and there's pushback, extremely frustrating, especially when you know that you have the answers. When you have the answers and you can fix things and then you get pushback, it can be very frustrating. So these items on this slide here are really to help you understand, we're going to cover how do you know your level of authority in the organization? What can you change? What can't you change? Or what are you going to need to do to make that change? Knowing what you can change versus knowing what you can influence, which is critically related to the relationships you build and the collaboration and inclusion that you develop throughout your practices. Definitely know what you can change. There may be some things that the board or ownership or leadership of the organization may say, we're not okay with this. Just no matter what you think, this isn't going to change. And then understanding this really allows you to approach it effectively, efficiently, and you're going to have more success. So I really like focusing on frustration avoidance. Mental health is critical. We've learned that through COVID and other things that have gone around in the globe. Life work balance, having that mental health can really help you focus and be successful in your role. So the strategic plan, really, preparing for it and having this plan. As I mentioned, you should have, you'll be building planning and initiatives throughout your entire journey at the school. This is more about your professional plan for yourself. So the first 90 days is going to talk about different plans you're going to implement and execute. But I want you to think about the 90-day plan as your plan, right? The plan is going to help the school and the organization, but it really is your 90-day plan, which components of it might be launching other strategic plans or operational plans or things for the school itself. So before I start going through actually preparing it, are there any questions that I can answer for anybody in the group? Again, I'm happy to pause and answer a question if there are any. Otherwise, I'll keep moving. So preparing that needs to be a practical plan and realistic. If it's not practical, you won't be able to do it effectively. And if you don't have it realistic from a timeline or influence or gauging the environment, it might not work as well. For example, if you go into an organization who is extremely excited about the change, look like they're going to adopt change quickly, everybody seems to be on board, there's not much resistance to change, you might be able to set timelines and deadlines very fast and aggressively. If you go into another organization where adopting change is slow, you're picking up a lot of resistance, maybe the person was terminated and there was a whole group of people that like that individual. I mean, if you're hitting resistance and you're hitting challenges and you set too aggressive goals, you'll fail your own goals. And the idea here is to set yourself up for success. So it's about really being practical and realistic in setting those goals. You want to be very intentional. You want to make sure that every step of this 90-day process is intentional and willful, and that you execute it so that you can stay on track. So you want to focus and move that forward. And if you only put a plan together, it's great to have a plan, but if you don't execute it, it's worthless. So this is really a living document that you're going to evolve, that you're going to change, that the process will adapt as you meet different people in the organization, in the school, and you get different feedback of where you need to go. So definitely practical, realistic, intentional, and then execute it. And then that flexibility is because life happens. It's not the planned problem that you're going to be dealing with. It's the Tuesday afternoon, a teacher calls you with a problem with a student or a parent, and you've got to deal with it. And it has nothing to do with what you were planning on doing that day, right? So all the unexpected, your plan also needs to be very flexible with things that could happen environmentally, internally, externally, or whatever challenges might come up from the organization. Any questions before I go into the first 30 days? Looks like there might be some in the chat.
Yeah, we have a couple of questions.
Fantastic. Do we share our plan with stakeholders or management? So the first 90-day plan, you can, but as we go through this, what you're going to see is that you're going to be building things to interact with the stakeholders. You're going to be building things to share with management. Again, this 90-day plan is your plan. Okay, so it's your plan on how you're going to set yourself up for success, what you're going to do with those stakeholders, what you're going to present to management. Now, certainly, I've shared my 90-day plans in the past with my people leader. For example, when I was with the state of Delaware, the court system, the chief justice there, she had some goals she wanted to accomplish. And in order to make her feel very confident and comfortable that I was on the same track and aligned with those mission and goals, I shared my 90-day plan with her so that she understood, okay, what you're doing is aligned. So you'll be able to feel out your stakeholders, you'll be able to feel out your management to see whether or not, whether you need to share it with them. But for the most part, it's for you. And then the other question here is hi, how would you recommend to share the 90-day plan with your line manager? So if you're speaking about sharing it down or to staff that you work with, there's different components and initiatives that I would be assigning, right? I would be assigning to my staff that would give them the tools and resources and support to execute. But I don't necessarily, very rarely have actually shared my 90-day plan. Usually this translates when we go through it into items that you will share, but this is really for you. This truly is about your success, right? It really is. So let's start looking at some of these things from the first 90 days, and then it might make more sense. So day 1 to 30, you started in the organization. There's going to be some type of onboarding orientation. Unfortunately, in my career, if I've gone in as the HR leader or operations leader in an organization, sometimes there was no training or onboarding because there was no one there to do it. But day 1 to 30 is really when you're learning the current state. So I always refer to current state, future state. Current state is what you're walking into. Future state is what you're aspiring the school to achieve and get to. Their mission, vision, and goals, fine, but you're gonna be part of driving change for the organization, and that change is going to result into a future state that you want for the students, for your staff, for the teachers, just for the school as a whole. So 1 through 30, these early days are all about assimilation. It's all about learning as much as you can about the organization's current state, their processes, their systems, their people, how they interact, how they communicate, who influences what. A lot of times I talk to people about identifying who are the intrinsic authority holders and who are the extrinsic authority holders. And if you're not familiar with these terms, if you are in the role of principal, that title comes with authority, comes with empowerment, comes with who you can tell what to do, what not to do. But there are always individuals, and you will find them, and these are some of your greater leaders, that have extrinsic authority, that through how they build relationships, how they treat people, how they collaborate, their diversity of thought, how they're inclusive, become leaders, and they're looked to for guidance and direction, even if they don't have that title authority. So when I say here, identify systems process and people that you influence, impact, and you'll have responsibility for, some of those individuals are going to have a lot of influence that you're going to need to leverage. So this is a learning experience during these first 30 days. Who are they? How are they getting things done? How do things get done in the school today? Because if you can't map out and look at very, almost analytically and objectively, like what's going on, you won't know how to start moving that needle. And even an organization that is seamlessly working beautifully, hitting all goals for the students, hitting financial goals, whatever's going on, you still have a responsibility to take that school to the next level, right? Make them more differentiated, make them more appealing to students, like attract more students to the school and just grow it, more reputation, more successful curriculum. So it's all about what are they doing today, and identifying those internal and external stakeholders and dependencies. Maybe, well, wait a minute, why are we doing certain things? Why are certain projects going on? Is there a reason we're doing that? Is it a regulatory obligation? Is it just a local custom? Is it a culture-driven type of stakeholder that we need to look at? So learning who those folks are as well is critical. And then if it's possible to meet with who the incumbent was before, and usually it is unless they were terminated, if they had retired or they're transitioning out or they were promoted and they're still with the organization, I would most certainly meet with that person to get a feel from them of what their views and perspectives were. Where did they have success? Where did they have challenges and failures? Now, I never recommend placing all of your views and perspective of your staff on the prior incumbent. It's really important for you to come to your own conclusions about people's skills, strengths, weaknesses, doing that little SWOT analysis of where they can add value and where you need to help them be successful. But this still is a learning experience for that perspective. And then when you're exploring this, you're going to identify challenges and obstacles in the current state. And trust me, it will become glaringly obvious based on your experience as a principal, based on your experience as a academic professional and teacher, and whatever your role is. Basically, that experience is going to let you see whatever the current state is, where there's holes, where there's gaps. I guarantee you will see things that you're like, why are they doing it that way? Just as simple as why did they do that? Or, well, that could be better. Or when I did this in the past, this is how we did it. So you're going to be looking at that. And when you evaluate this current staff, again, we're only talking about those first 30 days because you're going to spend some time in orientation. You're going to spend some time onboarding. Is there training? Are they training you on systems, on processes, on practices? Is there technology they're using? You're going to be introduced to a lot of people. But while you go through this current state review, something that I'll refer to as just low-hanging fruit is going to pop up. Something is going to pop up where you're like, wow, it would only take me a couple minutes to talk to the team about changing that process or changing that practice, and I'm going to have greater success. Okay. So that's what you're looking for in the first 30 days. Assimilate, learn as much as you can. Because if you come in and demonstrate, like that chart said, don't do, if you just come in and say, we're doing this, we're changing this because of X, Y, and Z, without knowing what they're facing today, you're going to struggle. And you also will create animosity or adversarial relationships rather than collaborative ones. So this is the focus on those first 90 days. Assimilate, learn as much as you can, find out what that low-hanging fruit is, and you will identify something. And the purpose of that is we want to get a quick win. We want to identify a way to engage the folks you're interacting with and then get a win to show your value, and that the method of how you get the win is what you're modeling for folks. Is there a new question in the group, Jane? Okay, nope, just a comment. To get to know your team, would you prefer to interview with each team member formally, or would you prefer to get to know them through observation and formal conversation? I think it's a great question. So to me, it's a combination of both. I immediately start, and we're going to talk about that. I immediately start scheduling one-on-one meetings with my staff to meet them formally, to understand where they're at, set expectations, understand their strengths, understand their weaknesses. And informally would just be, throughout the day, checking in, how they doing, how you can help them. The whole section on performance management and managing up, we're going to cover that in depth as well. So great question, but I don't necessarily, well, they don't really know it's an interview when I do it, actually. But I do go through and try to understand the skills that person brings to the table, where they feel they're doing well and where they're not. I try not to focus too much on how they were evaluated by the prior people leader, because my skill sets versus that other person might be very different, might be very aligned or very drastically different. And my goal the way I view a supervisor, a people leader's response, and when I say people leader, I just mean managers, principal, anybody that manages another person, to me is a people leader. And when I have people think about it in people leadership, it helps you align with my mantra of tools, resources, support. The job of any people leader is to give that staff member the tools, resources, and support to be successful. And the reason I harp on that is if I ever engage with somebody who says, I want to fire this person that works for me, or this person's terrible, or whatever it may be, the problem with them, I ask that people leader, did you give them all the tools to be successful? Did you give them training? Were you available? Did you meet with them regularly? Did you give them feedback to be successful? If they answer no to any of those questions, I always say it's not the staff person's problem, it's that people leader that needs help first. So that's kind of how I would engage the team. So now we're in day 31, you've gone through your simulation, now it's time for action. Now it's time to start demonstrating value. Now it's start leveraging what you've learned and finding some solution to that initial low-hanging fruit problem. Could be a process, could be a communication, could be something as simple, and this is an easy win for everybody usually. A simple win can be, how were they having their staff meetings? Did they have regular staff meetings with their direct reports? Everyone gets extremely busy. Everyone sometimes loses touch. Sometimes you don't have regular one-on-ones, whatever it may be, but an easy win could be, you know what? I've learned through my first 30 days that you don't have very effective, collaborative, or engaging staff meetings. You're going to go ahead and change the model of how the staff meeting is held with implementing a proper agenda, having great topics, including around Robin, and then implementing one or two strategies that we can talk about of how you go about implementing a new model for staff meetings. And suddenly there's greater engagement and more diversity of thought. What a great, easy, low-hanging fruit to start demonstrating how you do things. Because remember, when you walk in as the new principal of an organization or a new leader, everybody's watching you. Everybody's watching. How are you going to communicate? How are you going to engage? Do you say hello to everybody in the organization? Do you ignore certain people? They're watching you and how you model your behaviors. And so it's not just what you put in writing or what you say directly to your team in one-on-ones. It's what's visible and transparent for everybody that you're responsible for. And I'm all about servant leadership. The organization is not there to serve you. You are there to serve your staff, your team, your management, ultimately the students that you're there to help and help them grow in their journey as a student. So that's one thing to do is value demonstrating that immediately low-hanging fruit. And it creates a term that I like to call followership. Some people follow you because of your title. Other people, like I mentioned, follow you because of that extrinsic characteristics and behaviors. And that's what you want to build, where people go, wow, I love the way he or she did that. And I'd get behind them on anything because they collaborate, they engage, they worked with the stakeholders, they found out who was dependencies. This goes back to the question that was just asked. Engage your staff and set clear expectations and start scheduling one-on-one sessions. I found a flaw in people leaders over the years where they had every intention of meeting with their staff regularly, but then they tell me, well, I get to meet with them once a month or every other month. I tell people at a minimum, you should meet bi-weekly. Even if you just carve out 30 minutes bi-weekly and you have a set agenda, the more frequently you have the meetings, the less craziness can happen in the meeting. Not much happens between 2 weeks. A little bit will happen, movement, progress. But if you have a meeting once a month or once every other month, imagine how much could happen and take place in that time that now you have to address, figure out, and sometimes too much time has passed to help correct it. And you don't want too much time to pass to be able to offer your team support. Meet with stakeholders regularly. So while you have a staff meeting with your direct reports, if you have various stakeholders that are necessary to make change, implement change, execute a program effectively, or that you have to report out to, schedule time with those individuals as well to keep them abreast and actually continuously learn from them of what expectations are and keep those aligned. And then, based on past performance or the objectives, one initiative should surface through these next 30 days. So you go after that low-hanging fruit. You're building relationships with your team. You're building relationships with the stakeholders and any dependencies of the organization, internal or external. And then these 30 days are where you should start learning about what is that one major obstacle or challenge that the whole team as a whole, collectively, not just you independently now, collectively believe if you overcame or solved that problem, you would just take the school to the next level. whether it's curriculum, whether it's regulations, whether it's attendance, whether it's how many people are applying, whether it's admissions, like whatever area of the organization that you think becomes that most challenging obstacle to meet your vision, mission, and goals, that's what you should start thinking about as setting up as an initiative moving forward as like the major project that you're going to implement for change. Let's see, the day one is a unique one. Thanks, servant leadership, only way to go in schools. Great. Are any of these things from Munde, German, or the other person, any of these questions, or are you asking about the day one unique, or are you just making that comment? I just want to make sure I understand if you have a question there as well. Good, just comment. Okay, fantastic. All righty. So now that you've gone through this, and remember, you're going to have a template. Like if you're going to get this, you know, if after the presentation, when you go in and put in your feedback from the presentation, it's going to trigger us to send you the slide deck so you have it. But if you want to work together to build this out, you can use a very simple template to design this first 30, 31 to 60, and 60 to 90 based on this guidance here on this presentation, so that you kind of understand and have little check marks of, did I do this yet? Did I do that yet? Did I do that yet? So you can set this up pretty effectively to manage for yourself. I don't like this many bullets on a slide generally, but I wanted to make sure I captured everything I wanted to communicate to you. So here's where you start now that you've gotten through identifying what that major initiative that you want to work on and accomplish for the school. You start planning that future state, right? So now you say, okay, I understand the current state. It's been 2 months. I've met with people, talked to people, looked at the systems, looked at the processes, all while still doing your day-to-day job, right? Dealing with problems that come up, calls that come up, student issues. So you're still doing all that, but this is more of the strategic side. So now you're getting ready to plan with your leadership team what you want that future state to be, and you're getting their buy-in. Having those one-on-ones with your team are also going to identify for you what your team needs from you. And we're going to talk about that in performance and managing up in a few minutes. But we really want to make sure you're engaging the team, you're learning more and more about them, you're finding out their strengths, you're finding out where their weaknesses or gaps are to help them be more effective and more efficient. And then in this stage, you really have to start developing a business case for change. And to me, if you were to go to the board or leadership or management, just say, we need to do this now. I figured out what you're doing. This is wrong, and we need to do this. It's usually pretty unsuccessful. But if you build out a business case, and to me, a business case is a document in which you're communicating the current problem or challenge, and then you document what you believe that solution to be. You should include cost, there's financial cost or resource cost, changes, systems, program, anything that has to happen, change, be bought, be archived, sunset, or whatever those changes are. You're going to put all that in there. You're going to put the impact of that change that you're recommending. You should put an alternative solution in there that you come up with, because it always sounds better when you have real true diversity of thought and you've collaborated and you go, you know what, A is the best solution, but B would also work, and here's the cost and impact of B. So your business case should have primary, your recommendation, an alternative, and then you should always include, and this is the trick that a lot of process excellence and project managers like myself use, you should always have what happens if you do nothing. So here's what's going to happen, and it's amazing. The whole sky is going to change if we do my idea. And then, oh, here's an alternative idea that could still work. And then always include what will happen if you do nothing. Sometimes nothing happens. Nothing, just status quo. So you can say, we have the same revenue, we have the same results, no change. Or it could be, if we do nothing, we're no longer going to be competitive, or we're no longer going to attract the right admissions, or we're no longer going to be able to have the right curriculum. So you want to have it where the individuals reviewing your plan have an idea of, this is what's going to happen if we take action, this is what's going to happen if we kind of do a middle action, and this is what's going to happen if we do nothing. And usually you need to present the if we do nothing as a pretty negative scenario, because not taking action to address a major initiative for the school should be problematic, right? Now, there'll be business cases you build throughout your career where the negative of doing nothing doesn't really change much at all. It might be a nice wish list of what you want to change. But in this, we're talking about 61 to 90s, where you're identifying that major obstacle that if you fix that, the school is just going to elevate. Okay? And then once you've engaged, you should be now learning who the stakeholders are. You should be demonstrating credibility in your approach, in your communication, showing who you bring to the table, involving all the different stakeholders, demonstrating diversity of thought, and really being inclusive, regardless of title. Try not to get too hung up, a lot of organizations do this, on the levels, the hierarchy and titles of people. Everybody in your organization, every human being that's working together for the school has ideas, and especially frontline folks have the most exposure to the problems generally. So make sure you're very inclusive in that. Any questions on these 30 days? This is really about articulating and honing in on that core problem that's going to allow you to make significant change and improvement for the organization. Change means moving forward. Yep, I agree with that 100%. To me, I learned many, many years ago from several of my mentors, the only constant in life and business to me is change. So anybody who is very change resistant, anyone who is an obstacle to that change, you really should spend time and work with them to help them navigate that and move through that process. Yep. Okay. So setting goals and expectations. So it's not just about the goals for the school itself. This is about strategies for goal setting just with your staff. So you asked earlier about one-on-ones and meeting with the staff. So it's an opportunity to engage your staff, right? It's an opportunity to share ideas and get ideas back from them. Shouldn't be about only what they can expect from you, but also what you can expect or need from them to be successful. So a very good and effective people management strategy, especially when establishing performance management and setting goals, is making sure that you let them know that they can set some things for you as well. For example, something as simple as saying, make sure you meet with me every other week on our one-on-ones and don't blow me off, right? Make sure we're having those meetings is an expectation. So right off the bat, you want to set very clear expectations. And the most effective and successful goal setting happens when it's agreed upon. Now, certainly we can take the approach that I'm in charge, I'm the boss, I'm the leader, this is what we're going to do. But if you engage and demonstrate that it's a mutual goal, that mutually we both win, we both from setting or achieving this particular goal or objective, it's much more welcomed, and those people are much more willing to adopt that change and move forward. And then hopefully everybody on this webinar, from your vast experience in your careers, understand a SMART goal. SMART goals are simply specific, measurable, actionable, realistic, and time bound. So if you give somebody a goal to change something and it would take 2 years to do it, and you expect it in 3 months, it's not going to work. So having mutual collaboration on setting the goals and then actually making sure they're SMART goals will really have a tremendous amount of success for you in just setting goals and expectations. But there's more to it though from a goal perspective. I encourage you, even whatever role you're in as a leader, to still work with the management team, board, whatever you need to make sure you have questions for your people leader. For you to be successful in the first 90 and beyond, you're going to want to know answers to these questions. So how do you measure my performance, right? You're going to want to know, do they have KPIs? Do they have specific measurements? Are there reports? Are there statistics? Is there data that they will use to determine your success? If you go into an organization thinking it's the same as your last organization, you may set yourself up for failure, because they may be measuring you very differently, or that particular individual might have different expectations for you. And then you also want to know how frequently you're going to meet with your people leader. Just like you want to meet with your staff every 2 weeks or so to make sure it's frequent, you don't want to go 6 or 7 months without speaking with your people leader to find out they're disappointed or you're not meeting some expectation. Because if that happens, you don't have any time or opportunity to change fast enough to make a good enough impact. So we want to make sure you're doing that. Find out whether or not the organization pays for performance. Is there something tied into your compensation related to meeting some types of goals or expectations through the process? And then, are you part of the process? The most successful performance review programs out there, and there's been a lot of change in the HR world as far as, should you do reviews, should you not do reviews, are they valuable or not? You want to have a self-review part of the process. And if there isn't that currently in the school, you may want to add a component of that, certainly teach you how to do that, so that the individuals are part of that process. Do a one-on-one and you think a person's doing very poorly and they walk in with a self-review that has them as a 5-star glaring champion. It's time for a little crucial conversation and get to it. So that's there. Any questions on setting goals? Take a look. Oh, good. Okay. So performance management, this means a lot different things to people, but how it impacts you is pretty critical in my. So you should ask yourself as a people leader, and you should talk to your people leader and various stakeholders in the organization. In their opinion, what does it mean to be a good performer, a poor performer, and meeting expectations? I will tell you, when I worked with Johnson & Johnson Pharmaceuticals globally, they had 9 levels of performance review. You could get a 1 all the way to a 9. And the difference between a 1 and a 2, nobody could explain it. A 5 to a 6, nobody could explain it. But every level got a different amount of compensation bonuses. And so we actually eliminated all that and brought it down to 3. The 3 categories were you're meeting expectations, you're exceeding expectations, or you need development. That's it, 3. So you'll want to understand in your school, what do those mean? Because you have to articulate effectively from every people leader to every staff member what they need to do to do a good job. And just telling somebody do better doesn't work. But sometimes I've had organizations where you have a very social, engaging, collaborative person who comes to work every day, does their job, and loves them. So are they doing their job? Are they meeting? Or are they exceeding expectations? Another person comes in, they're not very interactive, they're not very social, but they do a phenomenal job, great teaching, students love them, but they're not that warm, bubbly person. Both of them technically are meeting expectations. You shouldn't give the bubbly, more social person just a higher review simply because they're still just doing their job. And someone who isn't as engaging, maybe they need to learn those skills. So this is important to understand what is expected of you, but also what the culture is, right? What's the vibe for what it means to be a good performer, poor performer, and then what do they do to impact it? And it's critical, that piece of what they do to impact it. So in my experience, if there are no goals or expectations clearly set and communicated, it's one thing to say, look on the wall, there's our goals. But if you don't communicate them, if you're not giving regular feedback in those one-on-one meetings, right, training them and giving them feedback with the goal of changing behavior. So the feedback is to change behavior and make that person better. They don't have constructive feedback. Don't just yell at anybody, never yell at anybody. Don't give them negative feedback and say, well, fix it, right? You've got to be part of that. And if they're not working on meeting those expectations, right, if you don't see those changes in behavior, they're going to be failure in the role. This applies to you as well. If you're not getting certain things in your new role and you're not asking for it or holding them accountable, it's very difficult for you to be successful in that role. Flipping it around though, right? Productive employees don't happen by accident. So really great employees, if you ask them, what was the most significant contributing factor to your success? A lot of folks have told me in interviews over the years and discussions, it was their people leader, their manager. People leave jobs because of terrible bosses. People join companies because of great bosses, right? People leaders that are helping them. So if you establish goals, most people tell me, I'm happiest if I know what's expected of me. If I have to get up every day and go do my job and I don't know what's expected, it's very frustrating. So here it's about establish those goals, set expectations, give feedback, positive and negative. Don't only talk to your employees or send them an email when something's wrong. Send them those nice emails saying, hey, I know we set this goal. Looks like you've met it. Great job. Keep up the good work, right? Make sure you're balanced so that it doesn't only feel like you talk to them only when there's a problem. And then you will see a change in behavior. You'll see that followership develop. You'll see them less frustrated. You'll see them really aligned with the goals. And then boom, they can have some success. Any questions on this of how this piece works about one-on-ones, engagement, the performance piece? It's really key to make sure that you can follow through with that. So here's the concept of managing up. And it really is setting the stage for a symbiotic or a mutually beneficial trusting relationship when you manage up. And so just take a few seconds to read these questions, and I'll read them out loud, but just reflect on them yourselves. What does managing up mean to you? Do you do it at all? Or if you do it, do you feel you do it effectively? What are your fears when you think about holding your people leader accountable? A lot of people, when I say, hey, do you manage up and hold your supervisor accountable? And they go, I don't do that. No, my God, never. So think about this for a second. I think we might have a comment or a question. Let's take a quick look at that. Nope. Okay. Nope. Just very kind words. So thank you, everybody. So one of the things I wanted to share, here's a quick story and example. I'll go back to the judicial system that I was working in. So the chief judge of the court is basically viewed as like the CEO And then there was a court administrator that's viewed as like the COO, so operational leader and overall organizational leader. And when she first met with me, it was my second day that I got appointed. So they appointed me through the Chief Justice Office to this role. And so political, right, government appointments. She spent almost 2 hours and literally talking my ear off, just everybody. It was kind of funny, just telling me what she's going to do and told me what she wanted from me. And at the end of those 2 hours, I handed her a slide deck, just like this, a presentation. And I said, Your Honor, is it okay now if we go through my expectations? You should have seen her face. I was like, what do you mean your expectations? And I outlined how frequently we need to meet, the level of authority I have to have, the decision-making, the process, the roles, like staff I can hire. So I set the expectations right off the bat of what I expected from them. And I asked several questions that made sure that it was going to be a mutual relationship, not just one direction, right? I wasn't just taking orders and going marching. It was a collaborative engagement to achieve success. And so same thing for you, right? Same thing for you is that we want to make sure you engage your people leader as early in the process as possible. And when I say engage your people leader, you want to ask them, are we going to have one-on-ones and how frequently? And during those one-on-ones, there's a question I want you to ask them before there's a problem. This is why you do it right away. In one of your very first meetings with a people leader, and you're going to teach your people how to do this as well, ask that person, are they okay with you providing them feedback on areas that would help you both mutually be more successful? And the words you use are very critical, because if you go to a people leader and say, hey, can I tell you when you screw up? They're going to be defensive. They're going to be very upset, and they're immediately got their fists up to battle you. But if you say, listen, you're going to provide me feedback and I want feedback to be successful. Is it okay if I give you feedback that could be obstacles to our mutual success? That's key. All you're looking for is them to say yes. And I have yet to find a human being, due to the theory of reciprocity, that says, no, you can't ever give me feedback. So all you're doing in that initial discussion from a managing up strategy is setting the stage for later, if that person, individual, is an obstacle, a challenge, or you need more from them, you reference back to say, remember you told me that like you're open to feedback? Well, I have this problem I'm dealing with right now, and because we're not meeting regularly as you committed to, I'm not as successful for us. Right. So you're just setting the stage. So one of the things is to make sure you're setting the stage to have communication both directions. That builds trust. It also lets them know that you demand to be treated respectfully and as a professional in the organization, just like you want to treat all of your staff. And then it's a very practical approach, because it's just conversations. There's no demand, there's no authority thrown around. You're simply building trust between two people. Employees who trust the people they work for, and if you can trust the staff, you will uncover more problems, more challenges than ever before. You will be able to help your people, and again, provide those tools, resources, and support to set them up for success and make sure they're successful. And so as a people leader, not only do you want to do this and manage up, but you want to do that with your staff. So when I have a one-on-one with a direct report under me, one of the first things I'll say in the beginning, and I repeat it at the end, is there anything I could be doing better for you? Is there anything I can do to help you be more successful? Because if you're not genuine and if you don't really mean it, it's going to be obvious. They're going to know it. You're not going to have trust. It's going to break down. But if you truly embrace your role as a people leader and principal and leader in the school, and you work with your staff and those direct reports, and you show them you care about their success, you break down those walls of fear, you break down anything that would eliminate the opportunity for trust and an inclusive relationship, and they will come to you with problems that you can help them fix. And that makes for much more successful relationship between you and your staff. And you can accomplish so much more, because if you solve a few problems for them, help them increase their skill sets, fill some gaps that they have just by using your own experience. Imagine when you roll out that major initiative, once day 90 hits and you go into day 91 and you're rolling out and implementing that new major initiative, folks that you worked with in these first 60 and 90 days that you started helping them are very willing to adopt your change and then follow you. Any questions on managing up? I want to be very cognizant of time. Communication, can we get the recording so I can listen to it over and over? Oh, there's one person who wants to listen to my voice. God bless you. I don't know. I'll ask Andre at the end when he moves to the next slide if the recording can be available as well. But anyway, so any questions, open discussion, that's what we're going to cover today. I'll take a quick look at some of these questions too if we have a moment to ask it, but I want to be cognizant, respectful of all your time because we're at 8 and we only have about 15 more minutes. So any questions that anybody would like to ask at this point based on what we covered or what I didn't cover? Recording. Questions. Let's see. I'll look at the list here while you're thinking about your questions and type them in. Something in here. One of the questions: well, what's the most important characteristics of successful international school leaders? I think people are people anywhere you're at in any environment, organization. I think building trusting relationships, and I think it's very critical that people leaders model the behavior they're presenting. You know, it should never be do as I say, not as I do. One of the difficult challenges of maintaining that, modeling the behavior, is making sure that in every situation you're following your moral compass and you're following your ethical behaviors. But if you expect something from the rest of the organization, you need to model it yourself, and you should be willing to jump in and help anybody at any level at any time be successful in what they're doing. You'll see memes, videos, things online where they'll have a CEO, you know, that greets the janitor. Know the people and they're real humans and they're connected. You want to still have that same accessibility. You want to still be available, but you also have to manage your time well and know how to control those relationships and get people connected to the right resources. So to me, being a really successful leader, kind of the question here, what separates a great principal from an outstanding principal? Probably about how people view you. You know, sometimes your greatness to outstanding is a measure of profitability, a measure of admissions, number of students, how many of your students went on to great universities and colleges or whatever it may be. But sometimes it's just, you know, how people view you. Would everybody give you a great recommendation? Wow, that's the best principal I've ever worked for. That's the best leader I've ever had. You know, I enjoy waking up and going to school every day and teaching these students because I have someone who truly has my back and supports me. So it really depends on perspective. You know, in corporate world, a lot of times it's like, you know, what's the revenue? What's the profits, right? What's the EBITDA? But here, to me, I think it's more about, are you impacting the lives of those students? And is the staff and management team really behind you through that process? Key points. How to lead change management. Someone asked, how to lead change management? That's a great question. Change management is critical. So we talked about at the beginning that the only constant is change. You have to make sure that you're engaging the workforce, that you understand the impact of change, and that you can outline it from a project plan perspective. So if you aren't a project manager or don't have project management skills, you want to engage somebody who has extensive project management skills to help you build that program out. But change has to be really timelined so that it doesn't negatively impact your ability to deliver to the student population, doesn't impact your systems, your programs. Some people can come in and say, oh, I know a better system to use, and they just implement it without figuring out what the negative or the dependencies are. So leading change management requires having a collaborative team, making sure that someone's leading the charge and you have ambassadors to champion it, and that you're constantly measuring that progress, because change management is a loop. You come up with an idea, you communicate it, you implement it, you measure it, and then you make more changes. It's continuous improvement, continuous process change. One of the failures that I found over my career, and again, it's a great question about leading change. One of the great failures in any change initiative is lack of transparency and communication. And so if you're getting ready to embark on some kind of change initiative, or you need a change leader, you should reach out to Andre and I, because I've led thousands of projects over my career. And one of the greatest failures is not planning right, communicating right, and engaging before you kind of launch that change. Keep checking the chat here just in case there's a question. Okay. All right, so let me go on to the last one. I'm going to turn it back. Thank you all for your time this morning. It's been great this evening, this afternoon, wherever you are on the globe. But I'm going to turn it over real quick to Andre to talk about upcoming events.
Thank you very much. And yeah, on behalf of Leading Your International School and TAHR Services, thank you, Warren, very much for your time. I took a lot out of that, and I'm sure that our audience did as well. So I can't wait to watch the recording actually as well. So we'll try and make that available for folks, and we will send the slide deck out as well. So don't worry about that. Before everybody disappears, if we could all grab a group selfie together. It does make a difference. I'd just like to introduce 2 upcoming webinars. The next one, our culture and inclusion webinar, building an inclusive and engaging culture for success. That one will be led by Warren again next Tuesday. And then on Friday next week, we'll have our first webinar with Chris Grace and Alan Williams, Director of Business at Dulwich College and Suzhou. That one will be all about international school sustainability. Both webinars are free, so we encourage you to attend those. And if you are so kind as to make any recommendations to your colleagues about attending those, we would appreciate it. Okay, if everybody could turn their cameras on, and if we can take a quick selfie, we would appreciate it. Huge grins. Amy, you there?
Yeah.
Okay. If you are able to turn your camera on, if you are happy with appearing on LinkedIn, on social media, then we would appreciate it. If not, not to worry. Okay. Jane, are you ready? Okay.
Okay, great.
Okay, thank you so much for your attendance, and we will send out a short feedback survey. It's very, very simple. It will take less than a minute. So if you could spare us the time to give us some feedback, it would really help us. Yeah, if anybody has any questions for Warren, before we
I'm happy to
depart,
hang and answer any questions. If anybody has any, I'm happy to stay a few moments and answer anything that anybody has. It's my pleasure to
please.
present, and a lot of, want you to walk away with great knowledge you can implement right away.
If you have any burning questions about a role that you're moving into, any advice, now is the time. Are there? Okay, no problem, no problem. Are there any in the chat?
Any strategies for dealing with toxic staff? Oh, toxic staff, you mean you hire people that aren't going to work well? I'm only kidding. Yeah, so there's a whole corrective action model and program that I'd highly recommend. If you identify toxic staff, first and foremost, you want to find out, kind of like that very first slide, were they toxic before, or did toxicity happen because you've moved into a role that maybe they wanted, or maybe they were looking for, or whatever it may be. But people don't like change often if they don't understand it, if they're not embraced. Some toxic employees I've encountered through my career are toxic because the prior people